So my name is Ben Mojica. I'm a communications major in film concentrator at the College of St. Rose. And you are?
I am TJ Gibson. I am also a communications major and film concentrator at the College of St. Rose, in addition to being a recently completed music minor.
So we're gonna dive right in here. We're gonna talk about some movie stuff. So I think to get started, this is the very first episode, by the way, just so you guys know. Should say that in the title.
Yes, it is.
I think we're gonna start with 5 favorite movies.
Whew, okay. See, I haven't really thought about like my top favorite movies in a while. Like, oh, it's weird. My tastes are all over the place. You know. I don't know. I guess I'll let you start it, man, because you're the fancy like film connoisseur.
Oh man, I don't know about that. And I've always been of the opinion. I remember this is one of the first things I heard when I came to the school, and I think it was from Liz actually. Liz is one of the professors here at the college, and I remember saying, "Yeah, I don't know if somebody asked me, I don't know if I could choose my favorite movie," and I think the response I got back was that's the right response for a film major.
Yeah, it's hard to say because it's like it's one of those things like it's almost like a favorite song. It's like it kind of changes, depending on the day, or like you might be like, "What's your favorite movie?" And you're like, "In what genre?" You know what I mean? Because I could probably pinpoint like my favorite horror movie is definitely like The Evil Dead.
Yeah,
like because I mean I'm a huge fan of Sam Raimi just in general. I think he's an incredibly creative director, and I think he's super underrated, even though he was the original Spider-Man guy. But like it's hard. I wouldn't really be able to say that. Like as much as I'm a huge fan of Evil Dead and like the whole franchise, I wouldn't be able to say like that's my favorite movie ever.
Yeah,
that's
true.
It's hard, because like I don't know. I mean, like I also really love like kind of deeper cuts like American History X is a really good movie, or The Boondock Saints. Like those are kind of deeper cuts. Like or the generic stuff. Like I love Inception. I love pretty much everything that Nolan touches.
Yeah,
it's great.
Funny thing about Inception because I liked Inception when I watched it. I mean, granted, this was years ago, but I remember watching Inception and I rember talking to people about it, and they were like, "Oh, that movie was terrible," and I'm like, "What about it was terrible?" Like,
Inception is awesome. I mean, I think Nolan was at that level where people just wanted to like not like his stuff, like because he was coming off of the success of The Dark Knight, and I think it was kind of like people were just worshiping that Joker and that movie, just I mean it really is one of the greatest comic book movies ever made, like definitely, but like Inception was like his not his first chance to make like his own kind of thing, because he'd made a ton of movies on his own property. In fact, right. Batman was like his first thing, not in his own like IP, but like it was his first time to do it with like a massive budget and like some like real star-studded actors. I mean, he'd made movies with like Guy Pearce and Hugh Jackman and Robin Williams and stuff like that, but like to get like DiCaprio and Tom Hardy, up and coming on star on the rise, Tom Hardy, and like and that's one of Leo's best roles in my opinion. I mean he's great in everything he's been in for the last like 15 years.
That's pretty true.
But that movie, and it just like it's kind of a mind fuck like too, like it's perfect Nolan in that like it's thrilling and it's like this great like blockbuster action flick, but then there's also like stuff where you're like, that's really bizarre, and also like the end of it like makes you go like, whoa, what?
Is it
like,
still a dream?
Yeah, it is. And then like like I went to see that with I saw that in the theaters with a girlfriend I had at the time, and we argued endlessly for like whether he was in a dream or not. And it's like I think the best cinema is the cinema that makes you think, even if it's like, I mean, you get some sci-fi movies where like it makes you like philosophize on the meaning of life and stuff like that, but like if you see like 2001, like you're gonna talk about that for a while. But like Inception, it's not like the meaning of life kind of thing. It's just like, well, like literally our argument came down to like, oh, like it looked like it started to wobble, I think it was gonna stop spinning, and she was like, no, it wasn't. Like it's like,
but the wobble, that you could talk about that wobble for hours. I mean, the wobble implies that it's not a perfect dream, because if it's a perfect dream, then why would it wobble in the first place? But whatever. I digress. I think spinning off of that though, I think it's really kind of an interesting thing to think about movies and how leaving a movie and being able to talk about it, like that sort of the effect that good and bad movies can have, where if you leave the movie theater and you spend the next 45 minutes to like anywhere from that to like 3 hours talking about like the movie,
At that point, the movie's done its job, even if it's technically a bad movie, even if it's like poorly written, like a lot of movies that get huge budgets these days are. Looking at you, Fallen Kingdom.
Thor Ragnarok.
Oh, the Marvel hater coming in hot. More on that in a future episode. But you know, I think like there's movies that are technically bad, but like to my opinion, like nothing is worse than a forgettable movie. Yeah. Like if a movie at least like you remember it and like it left you with an experience, even if like you were like the story sucked or the acting was terrible or like, you know, there was some really like bad shots in there that looked like a low budget CW show or something, like, you know, or like you go and see Civil War and you're like, oh, it was just like nationalism and like you'll say, or you're like,
yeah,
you know,
I mean, I talked for hours after that.
That airport scene that is just horribly chroma keyed, you know, like,
yeah.
But like at the end of the day, like we're still going to talk about it, and like, and that movie succeeds. It's there to entertain. It's there to like be talked about, and it's there to like pay homage to the source material. Yeah. And you know, ultimately, as long as a movie like achieves the things it sets out to do, like Inception set out to blow your mind and make you argue about it, it succeeded. Like no matter what other thing you want to argue about it, you know, it's cheesy, dream within a dream, like everyone, you know, for the last 8 years has said, like, you know, blankception, like if you were like, you know, if you were doing like, you know, I don't know, this is going to be a bad example, but like a homework assignment, like about a homework assignment, you'd be like, it's homeworkception.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
You know
I mean, it's like
it's
anything that's like even remotely meta. It's just like, oh, that's Inception.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. And that means like that movie has like a place in our cultural.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that movie is very, very, whether you love it or hate it, that movie is pop culture. Like, it's got it written all over it. I mean, and more so than most of Nolan's other work, you know, even more so than, I would argue, even more so than Batman.
I mean, yeah, I think it is probably his most iconic work, you know, just like on the wide cultural frame. I mean, those of us who are like Nolan fans or maybe a little bit more into like film esoterically, we might say like Memento.
Oh, I love
Memento, which is another amazing movie. And that movie was like his first like, you know, major film, and it showed that he had this like penchant for, you know, twists and also like just a really interesting narrative that could be told like really like non-linearly and weirdly, but at the end of it all tied together and makes sense. And then he really like brought that out in Inception 10 years later. Yeah,
it's kind of funny. We've already digressed from the original question, which was top 5 movies, and you know, and I think I'm gonna put a little amendment onto that original question. I think I'm gonna switch it: top 5 movies in any order, not necessarily in your first to last or anything like that.
Okay.
So, I think for me, notable mention: Lord of the Rings.
Okay.
And you know, I know there's 3 of them. There are technically 3 of them. In my eyes, it's just one. It's one whole experience. If I had to pick one out of the 3 that I liked the best, I'd probably say the Two Towers. But you know.
Yeah, I mean, it was Fellowship that like made the impact on me, because when I was a little kid, like I read like a lot of like the Harry Potter books and stuff like that, but I never read like the Lord of the Rings books until I was older, because I couldn't do it.
It's a dense book.
Well, when you're like in middle school, that's one thing, but like I think was it 2001? I was 7, so like you know, like I just like when I saw it on film, it was like, oh my god, that's a big flaming eye in the sky, you know, and like I could get down with that, you know. And I think like seeing that fantasy and seeing like the CGI that kind of mostly still holds up today. Like, I mean, there's some shots that are, you know.
I mean, the great thing about Lord of the Rings is how little of it was CGI. I mean, like, What a Workshop does a great job, and that's really where they kind of broke out, is in Lord of the Rings, and they're amazing, absolutely stunning visual effects. I mean, like, the costume designs, the makeup, I mean, all of it, like the orcs. You just think back to the orcs. Like what movie has such an iconic, like, sort of like costumed villain? You know, that's so meticulously designed.
Well, I mean, I guess I would argue, I don't know, something like Alien.
Okay, yeah, but that's like one character. I mean,
okay, that's fair. You're talking like an entire race where you're like, I know an orc when I see one.
Oh yeah. And when you watch Lord of the Rings, you know a Lord of the Rings character when you see one. You know what I mean? Like you can identify an elf, you can identify a dwarf. You see that Gimli's axe.
You can identify a hobbit, like a little stubby guy with pointy ears. Like,
yeah. I mean, you look at the architecture or a random item from any of these races, and you look at that and you say, I know exactly where that's from. That's Lord of the Rings. That's that's an elvish sword, or Gimli's axe is the thing that I always think of, because it's iconic in and of itself.
Or the ring.
The ring, yeah,
literally,
absolutely.
like, you can see the golden ring with the cursive, on it and stuff. It's like, that's iconic. Like, nothing else has that ring or anything similar to it.
Yeah. And it's amazing thinking back on the movie and all of the things that they did in the effects. Like, even in The Fellowship, they kind of ramped it up in Two Towers, which is why it's like one of my favorite films.
But like that troll scene is like still gorgeous to look at. Oh my God,
absolutely.
In Fellowship.
And there are little things, like the subtleties. Like, there's that famous scene where Bilbo goes to hand the ring to Gandalf. Actually, I think it's Frodo goes to hand the ring to Gandalf right before the official journey kind of begins. And Gandalf drops it because he doesn't want to have anything to do with it.
Yeah, because he knows, like, it's tempting.
Wait. Hold on. I have to amend my statement. I actually remember exactly the scene now. It was when Gandalf pulls the ring out of the fireplace and puts it in Frodo's hand, and Frodo drops it because he thinks it's going to be hot. I think. I don't know. Whatever. Either way,
it's been so long since I've seen that movie.
Yeah. I mean, I've seen them a million times, but like.
Well, actually, no, it's not. We just watched them a few months ago for our fantasy class.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, that's right. I forgot about that.
That long since I've seen it. Actually, now that I think about it, I forgot about that. And we saw The Hobbit too, and so like,
Hobbit's a different movie.
Well, yeah, but like for a good segue though, like like you were just saying, it's the point that I really want to hit on is that, like you were saying, the effects, a big part of why they still stand up. I mean, you kind of brushed over it, but I think you were leading to a good point, is like, it's because they weren't all CGI. There was a great blend of practical and CGI, and I think that's something that is super lost on filmmaking today. And I think that a perfect example is comparing Fellowship or
Two Towers or the
Two Towers,
Return of the King,
any of those movies, compare them to
the Hobbits,
Desolation of Smaug or something. And you can see that because they way overly rely on the CGI, and that's not faulting that movie in particular. That's just filmmaking today. But like, that kind of leads me to my honorable mention, which is Jurassic Park, which is also excellent for the same reason, because like that movie still holds up today. Like I watched Jurassic Park like a couple months ago, and I was like, this looks like it could have been made today. I mean, like, the 90s, like, clothing and stuff aside, like the effects like hold up, because like a lot of the dinosaurs are animatronic, and everything is like, when they did use CGI, they knew they had to like really get it right, and so it was very sparing, but it was like done with certain lighting where it didn't like really reveal it, and like when you watch Fallen Kingdom or even the first Jurassic World, which I'm kind of an apologist for, I did enjoy the first Jurassic World. It has its problems, but it's a lot more redeemable than Fallen Kingdom, I think. Pick either one of those films, just forget about the story, just talking simply about the visuals, and they almost, like, some people wouldn't argue almost, but like, they don't even hold up as well as the original does, because it's CG in every shot, and like a lot of the shots you can't really tell, but like, if you know what to look for, even if you don't, a lot of them it's like super obvious that that's like a a CG velociraptor.
And I think it takes a lot to make a CG scene that'll stand up to time. I think like some of the potential like examples, I think some of the new Star Wars movies have CG that's really kind of next level, and I think Star Wars as a sort of history for effects. Well, I always think of the X-wings, the redesigned X-wings that they use for the new series or the new trilogy, and
even the sabers.
Awesome. all of the above. All of the above. But I Star Wars has kind of a legacy for pushing special effects above and beyond. I mean, the original
until they
Star
pushed
Wars
it too far with their re-releases.
Well, I think the re-releases had other problems other than the special effects. But definitely. I do want to get back to real quick though the ring scene that I mentioned earlier.
Oh, sure, yeah.
The reason why I brought that up is because in that scene the ring falls to the floor, and there's this beautiful shot. It's a close up of the ring hitting the ground, and it hits the ground, and there's this ringing noise and this thud, right? And the ring just stops on the ground, to kind of emphasize the weight that this ring carries. And I remember reading afterwards, after the fact, that they had actually put magnets underneath the floorboards in that scene and dropped the ring, a metal ring, so that it would magnetize to the floor, so that it would have that effect. And like it's those little subtleties, that I find so endearing about, especially science fiction and fantasy movies.
Yeah, but I mean they might have done that today, but chances are they probably would have just done a CG ring and had it, hit a CG floor. And then
absolutely.
Put that in there,
and I think today, kind of taking the Marvel movies as an example, I don't even think they would have done something so subtle. I think their instinct would have been to make something huge and grandiose and like beautifully, animated. But like, you know, it's not the same as those like subtle, those soft moments. Like an extreme close up of a ring hitting the ground is something that you don't think of as like grandiose. You know?
Or you know, Jurassic Park. Like another thing that Jurassic Park really did well that the Jurassic World movies have done the opposite of is that they knew how to make a monster movie in a lot of ways where it's not about what you do see, it's about what you don't. Or it's about the little glimpses you get of like a velociraptor's eye in the bushes, or like, and then he's like, clever girl, and then like it just comes out of nowhere and like you get this big, you know, like this series of shots of like a full sight velociraptor and stuff. But like in Jurassic World, effects have come far enough where they were like, look at these dinosaurs in broad daylight, like look at them, you know, and that's when they don't hold up because like they're just being like too obvious about it, and there's like zero subtlety to it. And subtlety, I think, like you're saying, it's the key. It's like you know, it not only does does restraint typically do a film well in a lot of ways, but also just taking the time to get little shots like that, you know. And like as much as I love Infinity War, you know, like I can see what you're saying. Like I don't think the Russos would like no diss to them, like they're great directors. I don't know. I think with what they were handed with, what was it, 75 or something like that heroes in that movie, or something like some ridiculous number that they had to balance, and that movie still makes sense. Mostly okay, it's coherent, all right, and it's still fun. It could have hey man, Batman vs Superman couldn't handle three heroes.
I agree with you there. I agree with you there.
You know, and I like some things about Batman versus Superman, but again, another discussion for another day. But Infinity War is the far superior film.
Yeah, well, I mean, if you're comparing the two, but most films are superior to Batman versus Superman.
That's fair. I mean, even like most of the 20th Century Fox, you know, comic movies have been better.
Of comic movies, movies,
but have still been, you know, like
relative failures.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like not the first two Singer X-Men's. Those were massive smashes.
That's true.
And I would argue Days of Future Past is awesome as well.
I'm glad you think that, because like I liked Days of Future Past, and a lot of people didn't.
Really?
A lot of people didn't. Yeah, well, that I talked to anyway. And you know, and like I'm also biased because I love X-Men, and like the same way that I love X-Men, a lot of people now that I talk to love like the sort of current Marvel Cinematic Universe characters, like, you know, like Joyce, for instance, our friend Joyce. Was a really big fan of the Punisher. You know, I was never a big fan of the Punisher, so it doesn't hold the same kind of like glow for me. But like I really do love all of the X-Men. I grew up on the X-Men, you know, and seeing their movies, maybe they're not as glossy, maybe they're not as colorful, maybe they're not as like, you know, funny as the current, you know, series of Marvel movies that are coming out right now, but they hold a special place in my heart.
Yeah, I mean, somewhere in my house I have probably 10, 15,000 comic books. And I literally probably 5,000 of them. I mean, I'm exaggerating a little bit, but like most of them, like a good majority, are probably Uncanny X-Men. Yeah. Like I read a lot of Uncanny X-Men, and I loved the 90s show.
Everybody did.
The first movie my parents ever brought me to see in the theaters was the first X-Men.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I was 6 years old, and my mom was both my parents were pretty big comic book fans, and my mom especially like really loved like Blade.
Oh yeah.
And
I remember watching Blade as a kid.
She actually really loved Spawn too, which is a kind of forgettable movie, but like it's fun to kind of go back and revisit.
Seen it.
Really, it's worth your time if you want to check it out. John Leguizamo, saying his name right? I don't know. He's in it.
You should know better than to ask me about names.
That's true. You're not exactly the name guy. That's kind of my job, but yeah, you know, so the point is like they brought me to see it, and I kind of like, I was already really into comic books and superheroes. I already been reading comic books. I already worshipped Batman the Animated Series, and I was already, you know, subscribed to, you know, several different Spider-Mans each month too. I think I had The Amazing Spider-Man, Spectacular Spider-Man, Marvel Legends Spider-Man. Like so I was already really into comics, but like seeing it in like that format and seeing like what you could do with a superhero blockbuster, which is, that movie's pretty rudimentary, like in our day and age, like looking back on it. But like at that time, it was just such a spectacle, like to behold, you know, see, like to sit in the theater and just see these big, you know, set pieces and, you know, these colorful characters be brought to life in such a respectful and fun way that, you know, really like stayed true to like the show I watched and the comics that I read and everything just blew my mind. And to this day, like that's an experience that stays with me. And the first movie I ever saw opening night on the Thursday showing was Sam Raimi's Spider-Man.
Okay.
We saw that on its Thursday, like midnight premiere. And again, I was like,
good movie.
I was like not even 8 years old yet, I think. And they were like, let's go see Spider-Man. And I still remember standing in the line and people fighting and pushing each other out of the way to get into the theater and just,
Yeah. I think the first movie I saw opening day was actually Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets.
Nice.
And I went with that. I went and saw it with my grandmother at a really small local theater in Cobleskill, and I remember the line was huge, and I remember really loving it. I was always really big into fantasy and science fiction, and even as a little kid, like Harry Potter just like lit me right up. But kind of to move away from that kind of field of movies, I will say one of my top 5. So I think this is now the second on my top 5 list after Lord of the Rings, is going to be Do the Right Thing, Spike Lee's movie.
I haven't seen that.
Oh, that's a watch. I'd put that pretty high on your list, honestly.
Give us a quick spoiler-free synopsis.
Spoiler-free synopsis. It follows the lives of a bunch of these characters who are living in this sort of predominantly black neighborhood in New York City during the hottest summer of the year. And this is taking place kind of in the early 90s. And, it's kind of like this play between this Italian old world pizzeria that's sort of operating in this black neighborhood and all of the things that kind of happen in relation to these white Italian and frankly kind of racist pizzeria owners and this black neighborhood. And Spike Lee does a really amazing job of kind of tackling a lot of different really serious topics in a kind of more lighthearted way, at least till you get to the end. I mean, the end, I think the first time I watched that movie was actually in a film class, and I remember people left the theater or left the viewing room crying because it was so intense.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, the ending is intense. It's an intense movie, but I mean, for most of it, it's very like sincere, I think is a good way to put it.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's definitely one of my favorites. I'd put it on your list to go check out.
All right, yeah, I definitely will. I gotta think about it. Well, okay. Well, I guess I'm just gonna have to go out and say it. The Last Jedi.
Yeah,
we were talking about this. Ben and I were talking about this last week, and I mean, there's going to be a lot of Star Wars fans. If anybody's listening to this, there's probably going to be at least a few who are going to completely hate me and both of us now. But it's taken its spot as my favorite Star Wars movie. I mean, I still love Empire.
Empire is iconic.
Yeah, Empire was my favorite my whole life until I saw The Last Jedi, and I just think The Last Jedi is like one of the closest movies I've ever seen come to perfect.
Yeah, and I think that we're going to catch a lot of flack for this part of the episode, but I will say I love The Last Jedi. I mean, you're right. We talked about it the other day. I think that, all of those Star Wars fans out there who were really upset with that movie, I think you need to sit back and ask yourself why. And is that really a good reason? Like I understand, Mark Hamill played a character that you didn't see as your Luke Skywalker maybe, but I think he played a real Luke Skywalker. I think he didn't play an idealistic character. He didn't play a, this sort of hero who's been a hero his whole life. He played a real person, and I think that was always the biggest complaint that I heard from people is that they didn't like Mark Hamill's ending.
Yeah, I mean, his ending or his whole character. I mean, I think you make a great point with like think about why you don't like it, and we're not saying that the reason you don't like it isn't valid, but I found that a lot of people that don't like The Last Jedi, it's not necessarily reasons that are invalid. It's just them saying like it's not my Star Wars, it's not my Luke, and I think I guess that's valid if you have a certain viewpoint of Star Wars and you're precious about it, and that's perfectly understandable. There's a lot of things that I'm super precious about, and I think if The Last Jedi was a crap movie on like the technical fronts, like if it was poorly written or it was super just disrespectful in like a really noticeable way, not like them just being like screw everything you know about the Force, like in like a way that just like really like crapped on everything the characters are, and some people think that's what they did, but I don't think so. I think it's a really really good movie, and I think if it wasn't, I might also be really precious about it and really upset, but if your reason for disliking that movie is like the Luke that's in it isn't like my Luke, or like I don't like how they treated the Force, or
like I don't like that there's a female Jedi lead who's literally awesome and badass.
If that's your opinion, that's you need to not have that opinion. Like,
yeah, like, I mean, that's a problem that I've run into a lot, and like my roommate always makes fun of me. He's not a big Star Wars person. I've always loved Star Wars. I come from a Star Wars family. I love the new Star Wars series. I think that the choices that they've made in terms of like flushing out these new characters, they nod to the old Star Wars, but they also acknowledge that we live in a different time than those Star Wars were released in.
I'll be honest, I'm not a fan of Solo. I know you haven't seen Solo yet. It's not like a terrible movie. It's just it's really boring, I think, and like really unnecessary. Like, did we really need the Kessel Run? Like, did we really need to like see, you know, like how like they literally tell us, like, I don't know if you know this because you haven't seen it, like why he's called Han Solo.
Oh,
like,
yeah,
okay, I'll just tell you. This is like in the beginning of the movie.
Spoiler alert if you haven't seen it.
Okay, yeah, this is like spoiler alert for something that happens 8 minutes into the movie. Like he like literally he like is escaping. I forget who's coming after him.
Some MacGuffin.
Yeah, some MacGuffin ass shit is coming after him, and so he like escapes through a crowd, and he like goes to join. Again, I wasn't paying enough attention to like know like what like to remember like what organization he goes in. It was like some military organization or something. Mm-hmm. It might even be the Empire. I don't remember.
I remember reading something about how he's like in the Empire, but he doesn't want to be. I don't know.
It probably was the Empire. I don't really remember because I honestly, Ben, I really didn't care. But like he comes up and he's like, oh, the guy's like, what's your name? And he goes to enlist, and he's like Han, and he's like, basically like Han what? And he's like, or something like that. He's like, who you have anybody with you? Like, what's your family? And he's like, I'm by myself. And he's like, all right, Solo. You're now Han Solo. And I was like, that's how he got his name. He got his name because he was Solo, because he was literally Solo. Like, I don't know. It's whatever. It's just there's other problems with that movie. But I think the mainline Skywalker saga movies have been awesome. I mean, yes, The Force Awakens is like a direct remake of Episode 4, but Episode 4 is a great movie, whatever.
And this is what I say every time, and this is something I said before the movie was even released, and we talked about this last time, but like, you know, episode what was it, 7 was proof that Disney could make a Star Wars movie. That's why they made that. They made a remake of Episode 4 so that they could prove that they could make a Star Wars movie the way that everybody remembers.
And they did. They did it 110%. And then that gave them enough license artistically and financially
to then do Rogue One and then do, you know, Episode 8 and, you know, unfortunately Han Solo.
And Rogue One is the best retroactive fix I've ever seen in my life, because
the most effective retcon in history.
Yeah, because it literally is like, oh yeah, so you remember how there was that fatal flaw in the Death Star? Fully intentional, and literally like this plot of this movie hinges on that. Yeah, no, it wasn't. Like, we totally meant to do that. We just forgot to tell you till now. But whatever, like it works because now it's official canon, and you're like, oh wow, like, and especially the way they integrate it with the Resistance or the Rebels and everything. It's like,
and Jyn Erso's whole plot line. It was such a well thought out, you know,
and also knowing all those characters had to die, but also still like being able to engage you in the narrative.
My God.
And, like,
I remember having watched Episode 7 and thinking, all right, they're gonna make the old campy Star Wars that I know, that I remembered from growing up, and then they made Rogue One. And I remember we were getting closer to closer to the end, and I'm like, what are they going to do with these characters? Mm-hmm. And then they all died, and I was just like, oh, spoiler alert, sorry guys.
Yeah.
But I think it's been out for long enough that you should.
It's a prequel. It's a prequel that ends literally like 30 seconds before episode 4.
Yeah. So like, I mean, there is no way any of those people could be alive. But I guess I was so
happily
shocked.
Ever after, off in the distance.
I was so shocked that they did it.
The way they do it too, like you get to see like the incoming nuclear explosion, and you're like, they're gonna get vaporized.
Yeah,
and
that was a ballsy
literally
decision.
That is the end of that movie, and then they all died, but Princess Leia at the end. Like,
I mean, I think that does something great, like emotional levels, you know, like about how Star Wars is a series, it's a franchise built on the idea of like hope, you know, and like this sort of like idea of the perfect, future, that you can always do better. And I think that Rogue One really shows that, it doesn't come easy. It doesn't just happen.
Yeah, like freedom isn't free, right? Like, that kind of thing. Like, but literally, like that movie like set up these characters who were doomed from the start. We knew that as an audience, and they knew that as characters. This was a suicide mission. I think somebody says it in the movie, like literally, this is a suicide mission or something like that. And like, but they knew it's what they had to do, and like they knew that was their calling, and like the movie honors that. Like the worst thing would have been literally like if they had been like, and then they all lived happily ever after, and we just never heard from them again or something. Or like, in episode 9 we have like, decrepit Jyn Erso like shows up to like, I don't know, help Maz Kanata or something, like, like that would have been, it would have just undercut everything that film had set up, where it was like, like these guys know that they're marching to their deaths. Like these guys are soldiers, and they're committed to, bringing this justice, then like doing this thing that needs to be done. Even if it means for them losing everything, it brings something good for their cause, and they made something of their life, and like, and when they die at the end, you're like, God damn, they did. Like,
oh, absolutely.
like even like that, one of my favorite scenes in any Star Wars movie ever now is Darth Vader coming down the hall and just cutting motherfuckers down.
Yeah.
But like even that scene, you're like they still managed to get it away from him, and he watches the ship fly off, and as Leia's like, like we got it,
and directly right then and there, start of episode 4.
You can literally start episode 4, and you're like, she just walked down that hallway, like she was in that, like literally that, and like, oh, Vader when he comes up and approaches her just got done slaughtering like a dozen dudes, like
Now, of course, that movie had problems as well. We can't give it I can't give it a free pass. I love it. It's a great movie.
Well, Rogue One.
Rogue One.
Oh yeah.
I mean, Grand Moff Tarkin.
Oh,
God, that is uncanny valley.
Yeah, I was gonna
uncanny valley.
Extremely.
Sure.
That it's it's technically pretty well done. I mean, like, okay, hear me out. Like, it's okay. Have you seen Tron Legacy? Because we've come a long way from Jeff Bridges and Tron Legacy. But you also see literally any of the new Planet of the Apes movies, and Caesar, all the apes, but especially Caesar, Andy Serkis's Caesar looks
beautiful.
Amazing.
I completely agree.
So photorealistic.
It's funny. I do want to go back to Tron really quick. This is an important film history kind of thing that I want to point out here. But like the original Tron was not pretty.
No,
it was hideous computer graphics, but it was revolutionary. It did something that was never done before.
Right.
And Tron Legacy is kind of the same way.
Yeah, I mean, looking back on it now, it's dated just like the original is. But yeah, I mean, like at the time, like none of us were like, that's so believable. But at the same time, we were like, whoa, like they de-aged somebody.
And like, whoa, they just transported somebody from a real character from the physical world into a digital environment. That's something that was unthought of before that point.
But you look at where de-aging has gotten us to now, right? And this is where like the Grand Moff Tarkin thing is a bit different, right? Because I forget the actor's name who originally played him, but he's not with us anymore. He hasn't been for like 25 years or something now. And so they had to have a different actor, and they made his face completely new and everything. And his hair and eyes are like at this point still almost impossible to get right on like a real human figure. But when you have somebody who's still alive and you're just de-aging them, we've come a long way with that. Like, I know you're not the biggest fan of Guardians 2, but Kurt Russell in the beginning of that movie, de-aged, is
they did a really good job. Yeah.
And even like Robert Downey Jr. A few years ago in Civil War, right? The very beginning of the movie, there's like Sid is Civil War, I think.
Yeah.
It's where like the woman approaches him about how like in Sokovia, if I might have been Avengers 2, I don't remember. But there's a scene, it's either Avengers 2 or Civil War, where like there's like a quick scene in the beginning where like you see like de-aged Robert Downey Jr. and it looks like he walked out of like Less Than Zero in the 80s. Like looks amazing. And now we have Captain Marvel.
Yeah.
The entire movie, Samuel L. Jackson is going to look like 90s Samuel L. Jackson. And just judging from the trailer, it looks seamless.
Yeah, I'm excited. I'm really excited for that.
So it's come a long way. And, we can thank Tron Legacy for like having the quite frankly, the balls to
start that,
to try it, even if it wasn't like a, rousing success, in terms of like holding up forever.
Yeah. And I will say, like I was in high school at 9th grade, I think, something like that when that movie came out. I really liked it, you know, as a kid.
Oh yeah,
I remember watching that and being like, wow, this is like aesthetically really cool.
Yeah,
you know?
I think I watched that movie like probably a couple dozen times. I really loved that movie, so I'm not crapping on it by any means.
Yeah.
Just on like that, just the face part, and because you were, you know, so I guess to go, yes, Tron Legacy is great for like the things that it pulled off, but like to go back to Moff Tarkin, yeah, that's one of the things that pulls you out of that movie, right? When CG is done, even if it's technically like pretty well executed, like a lot of times there's that uncanny valley that like immediately pulls you out of the movie. I mean, yes, like as Star Wars fans and like film fans and everything, I'm sure you were as well. Before the movie came out, we were looking into it and we were reading, you know, interviews about how they brought back Moff Tarkin and all that, you know, so we knew what to look for. But still, like when he's in scenes like interacting with Krennic, you know, and like you see Krennic and you're like a person. And then it cuts to him, and you're like, ooh, cutscene, video game cutscene. Like, you know,
absolutely.
Yeah, there's just something like almost too smooth, like, and like it looks like a video game because like hair and eyes are like extremely hard to do, and that's another thing with de-aging is you get to use the person's actual eyes, and there's like they say the eyes are the window to the soul, and there's like
you can tell if there's no soul.
Yeah, there's no soul in a fucking computer graphic. And that's another thing with like anything that Andy Serkis plays, for example, like that's Andy Serkis's eyes in Caesar. That's his real eyes. That's you know, it's his it's his eyes in Gollum too, isn't it? Yeah. You know, so like
and I think he also plays what's Davy Jones in Pirates of the Caribbean.
Oh,
if I'm not
right.
mistaken.
Yeah.
I might be wrong there, but I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, or like you know, or another actor in the newer Apes movies is Toby Kebbell, and it's like he plays Koba, and it's his eyes in Koba.
Yeah,
and like you can see that Toby Kebbell coming through. He's another tremendous actor.
Yeah.
But yeah, isn't Andy Serkis is another character in the MCU besides Claw, though. He has a CG character, doesn't he?
I couldn't tell you.
I'm not Marvel fan right now.
I mean, I'm a no. Don't ever feel like a bad Marvel fan. Look, you know, and maybe this is coming from me, so it might not mean a lot to you, but like I love Marvel. Don't ever think I don't love Marvel. I grew up on Marvel. Marvel is far superior to DC in my opinion. I hope I don't catch any flack for that.
At least in film, DC's had. I read more Marvel comics than DC, so still, but like. There is a lot of merit to DC's comics and their cartoons.
I'm not saying they're bad. I'm just saying
but what we can say universally is that Marvel make better films than DC.
I guess that's valid. Anyway, I love Marvel. I don't like the MCU. I don't like a lot of it. Some of it I do. Some of it I'm really big fan of. I remember the first time I watched the first Iron Man movie, 2008. Obama was just elected. I was like, "This is dope." I was like, "It was a good year."
See how those 2 points connect?
Yeah, it was just it was a good year. It was a good year.
Yeah. Well, it's another revolutionary film.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, and that proved like a new formula, and that also proved like you literally said this perfectly when we talked about it last week. You were saying like Marvel, like with that movie, they figured it out. They're like superhero movies are summer blockbusters. Yeah, that's how you do them. Even if they don't come out in the summer, they are summer blockbusters. They are bringing the whole family to this. They are popcorn flicks.
Yeah, oh yeah.
And
absolutely.
they did it, and they figured it out, and they got the formula. And even if they have hardly deviated from that formula at all in 18, 19 films now,
they can still make a movie that's awful and will make more than the budget of other movies.
They can remake Iron Man, and they did.
Yeah.
In Doctor Strange.
Yeah.
Which we also talked about is like another movie that's like, you know, it is. I mean, it literally is like the exact. It's like literally like The Force Awakens to Episode 4. It's like exactly, and he's even like the
same
like,
kind of character.
Yeah, he's like a handsome douchebag with a goatee who's like you know rich and gets like leveled.
Yeah, goateed white guy.
Yeah, goateed white guy. That's that's like Marvel's go-to, I guess, when they have nothing to fall back on. But
even that movie, like regardless of whether it was like. They didn't add anything, but like to the sort of like, in terms of like quality, like it didn't improve on like the existing kind of Marvel format. Nothing was interesting that was added, unlike in Black Panther, which it's that summer blockbuster, but it is so much more than that.
It has Black Panther, I think, more than any other Marvel movie, and there's definitely Marvel movies that this goes for as well. Black Panther has so much soul.
There's so much more to it. It doesn't feel like a lot of the other Marvel movies, forgive me Marvel fans out there, but a lot of other Marvel movies feel like they're cash grabs.
Yeah, they're serviceable, summer flicks. Like it's like that entertained me. that was pretty cool to look at.
Yeah. Oh, look at Thor make that dick joke. You know, it's
that
like,
felt really, you know, true to what I remember. But like, they don't have like a real deep like philosophical message or like a real like, you know, they don't ooze like this kind of like passion for something that they're trying to say.
Yeah. Well, and you agree with me on this, and I say this all the time, but like a good superhero movie is a good movie whether it's a superhero movie or not. You know,
Mm-hmm.
the Nolan Batman movies, they're great. Doesn't matter if they're Batman movies, they're good movies.
It's a great movie that happens to have Batman in it.
Yeah.
That's the best way you can describe it.
Yeah, Iron Man is the same way for me, and I feel the same way about the Black Panther.
And or like Guardians of the Galaxy, right? Like, I mean, I know I like Guardians of the Galaxy more than you do, but like, you know, with Guardians, it's a movie about a bunch of misfits. Like, I mean, they're not even really superheroes. It's just like, you know, like some people
they're just
in like
people in space.
In space, yeah. You know, and there's like some sci-fi crap
Super
and some
campy space.
Yeah, you know, but like ultimately at the end of the day, though, like it really wouldn't matter what those characters were or who they were. They're just like, it's about this movie about these misfits coming together as a family and like standing together and standing for something, you know, and bonding and through hardship and everything, you know, like at its core. And that movie, like the movie has a heart, like, and it has a soul, in a way that, I don't know, like, you know, Civil War doesn't, or like,
Yeah, you got that
I
right.
love Ragnarok, but Ragnarok doesn't.
Yeah, you're right.
Know?
You're right.
But I think Infinity War does in bits and spurts, but I think its focus is in so many different directions.
It tries, but it fails.
I think it wants to give Thanos a soul, but then it also has him kill half of everyone ever.
For no reason.
Yeah.
For completely in his power to not have to do that, and he just does anyway. Completely irrational character. I'm not a big fan of that movie, but I think it's probably, this is a good time to move on back to the original statement.
Oh, you mean the five movies?
Yeah, and I think I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna add my next movie onto the list. I'm gonna go with Nausicaa in the Valley of the Wind, animated film by Miyazaki, older, by far one of my favorite movies of all time.
I haven't seen that one either.
God,
I'll be
TJ.
honest, man. I'm not really into anime.
I mean, so, you know, I have, you know, my moments.
Nothing against anime.
No, that's valid. Yeah, no. I mean, that's completely fine. I think that I would never put, you know, just an anime on my top 5. Because, like, you know, really when you talk about Miyazaki movies, they're not anime. You know, they're animated, but they're not anime, you know? And I think that Nausicaa in the Valley of the Wind is, I mean, it's a commentary about the environment. It's a commentary about how we treat each other. It's a really serious movie. And it carries a good message, and I think it was way ahead of its time. Beautifully drawn, beautifully written, strong female lead. I think that, you know, this movie in the 80s, if I remember correctly, and it was doing things that, like, you know, filmmakers still have struggles doing today. You know, I think it's an absolutely phenomenal film. I highly recommend it. Any of you out here who haven't seen it, it's definitely one of Miyazaki's maybe less well-known films. It's no My Neighbor Totoro, but it is definitely worth watching.
Yeah, somebody like presented a film of his, like not the film, but like a PowerPoint that they watched the film and they kind of talked about it in one of my film classes I took last school year. It was like a newer movie. It was like something about like I don't know, some like Phantom or something. And he sounded like a really fascinating director. So.
I mean, that's really what he is. He's a director, and you know, Miyazaki talks all the time about how much he hates the anime industry. He hates what anime has become because it's not what he sought out for it to be way back in
Furries on
the
4chan.
60s. Oh my god. Yeah, I think we should move away from that topic. But
so how about Mad Max Fury Road?
Mad Max Fury Road. I think I put that at the top 5 of my favorite science fiction fantasy. I might even put that in my my top 5 movies of all time. I love that movie.
Yeah, that movie is another movie that is like perfect.
Yeah,
I can't think of one thing I don't like about that movie.
There's the reason why it won, like, what was it, 6 Academy Awards?
Yeah, something ridiculous.
That year it came out. I mean,
another movie, like a rare movie in this day and age that perfectly seamlessly blended practical and CG.
Yeah.
I mean, like, we're talking like real cars driving through the desert, real flames shooting out of flamethrowers, you know, but maybe the sky is CG or something, or like, you know, there's really, like, it's not really CG, I guess it is, like, but like, you know, really, like, you know, creative color timing, and like, you know, and stuff like that. But it's like, that's not something where it's like, we didn't feel like shooting this car chase for real, so check out like a video game cutscene.
Here's our animated computer graphics car chase. No, I mean that was, real actors, real creative camera work.
Yep.
And it was a great story, I'm kind of like, I was spoiled when that movie came out. I love Mad Max. I always have.
Same.
Right when I started getting to film, that was one of the very first films I actually discovered.
Thunderdome was one of the first movies I ever
God, it's the worst one.
Yeah, I know, but it's like, it's still good though. Like, I mean.
Yeah, I mean, even Thunderdome has a lot of character, I think that Thunderdome suffers from the plight a lot of successful movies do, especially when they're sort of indie to begin with.
Make it bigger.
Make it bigger.
Yeah.
Make it more popular. Make it more recognizable. Let's put a famous person in it,
I mean, they all had Mel.
Well, he wasn't. I mean, he was kind of relatively unknown when the first Mad Max came out. And that movie was almost incoherent. I mean, that movie was wild.
And that movie has like nothing to do with what Mad Max will later become.
That's true. Yeah,
like,
I mean,
a lot of that movie is still just like in the normal ass world, kind of like.
Well, it's like immediately post-apocalyptic. It almost has like a kind of like an uncanny valley, Clockwork Orange kind of universe to it, where it's like similar to our own but not.
Yeah.
And I think that it's really interesting how the first Mad Max movie blended into the second, because.
Right.
As different as they are, as completely different as the mise en scène, as different as the set design, as different as the settings themselves, the universe, and the characters.
You can believe that guy became that guy.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. After watching Mad Max 1 and then seeing, the second one, which, what was it called?
I was trying to think of the subtitle myself.
Yeah, it's not Fury Road, it's Road Warrior.
Road Warrior. That's it. Yeah, the Road Warrior.
Once you see...
That's the best one in the original.
And that's the iconic Mad Max.
Yeah,
that is the Mad Max, the Road Warrior Mad Max.
That's
the
like
can of dog
leather
food.
Jacket, spikes on it, like
malformed, leather daddies on fucking ridiculous, cars driving around in the desert. That's Mad Max Road Warrior.
Yep.
The Mad Max that inspired the Fallout series.
The Mad Max that inspired one of the most awesome Rick and Morty episodes.
Yeah. The Mad Max that inspired a lot, to say the least.
Yes.
And when, Fury Road came out, they channeled that Mad Max, and they not only did they make it modern, but like I really think they made a good movie.
Oh, yeah. Well, and that's another movie with a soul to it. Yeah. Like, I mean, among all of the chrome mouthed, deformed psychopaths and everything, like trying to cut each other in half and shoot flamethrowers out of guitars and shit like that. Aside from all of that, like, glitz and glam and spectacle, like, there is like a story here about like resources and, like the struggle between the rich who have it all and the poor who have nothing, we are the many. Right. And like, and like, it really is this struggle of like literally like Immortan Joe. That's
Immortan Joe.
Yeah. He literally is like the penultimate rich multi-billionaire who's like, I need all the things, and like all these people are like, just give us a sip, and he's like, all right, every once in a while I'll dump some water on you, best of luck, but like I'm keeping everything for myself. And then like the whole movie is like him just trying to hold on to like that. Well, he's trying to go back and get his women and everything, but like whatever. The point is that like good sci-fi is sci-fi that takes real issues and exaggerates them. Yeah. And like, exaggerates them into like this crazy narrative that's super entertaining. But like at the end of the day, like if you really, hone in on like its point, it's talking about real things that are relevant in the real world. And that's one of those things. I mean, it like literally is like, it's almost a movie about like the 1%, or something rising up and everything.
Yeah, it's very much, it's got a lot of layers to it. You've got that sort of socioeconomic interpretation. There's also, like the mental health interpretation, looking at Mad Max as like, he's mad. Why is he mad? What happened? What's his problem? And then there's the Furiosa, like her whole angle on that film is
Charlize
amazing.
Theron is fucking amazing in that movie. She's been amazing in everything she's been in for
amazing actor.
But also Tom Hardy. I mean, that guy is a force to be reckoned with. I mean, like, I can't think of a movie I've seen him in that I don't like love him in.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm worried about Venom, but not because of Tom Hardy. I'm worried about Venom because I don't think Sony knows what they're doing with the Spider-Man like world.
Yeah, they're kind of releasing a movie at the complete wrong time.
They're like you know, it'd be awesome if we made movies about Spider-Man villains that exist as foils to Spider-Man, but we didn't have a Spider-Man. You know, like it's just like Venom is great because he is a foil to Spider-Man. Yeah. He is great in like contrast to Spider-Man. Eddie Brock works.
I mean, he looks like Spider-Man. Like, how can you have a Venom without a Spider-Man?
He literally shoots webs and stuff. Like the whole reason why that symbiote has like the same abilities as Spider-Man is because he bonded with Spider-Man first, and he carried over like this. I'm genderizing the symbiote, but it carried over. Sorry, I just thought about it because I don't know if I think it has a sex.
Yeah, I have no idea.
But irrelevant. But it bonded with Peter Parker first. After Peter Parker had those powers, he had it for a little while. He used the suit. He abused the suit. He realized that the suit was, you know, gave him power, but the power wasn't worth that it was taking his soul away.
Yeah.
And so he got rid of it, and Eddie Brock, who was pissed off and who had had enough of, you know, being shafted at the bugle or just, you know, not doing like great in his life and everything, took the power and like took it to like way too far an extreme and tried to take down Peter Parker and Spider-Man. And then eventually down the line, like came around to being at least enough of a good guy to not be a total villain, be more of an anti-hero. And that's where you have like Carnage. But you need to set up that dichotomy first between Peter Parker and Eddie Brock, between Spider-Man and Venom. And I'm just worried that Venom isn't going to have that. Right. That's my soapbox about Venom. Tom Hardy's amazing, but I've heard that he's Tom Hardly in the movie. So I'm also worried about that.
Yeah. Moving on.
Yes.
I think that I've come to my final film on the top list. It's another award winner. I think for me, it's Leo's final the Academy Award, Revenant.
I still haven't seen The Revenant.
Oh my God, TJ.
I know.
Oh,
I've seen
so
I've
good.
seen like all the other modern Leo movies, like Wolf of Wall Street.
Oh, it's better
which is
than
another great movie.
Eh.
Well, also I love Scorsese too, and I feel like any respectable list is supposed to have Goodfellas on it, but like mine isn't. But like I love that movie.
And my list could have had a bunch of other movies. It could have had Night of the Hunter, could have had Casablanca, but it doesn't. You know, and because I think
Good, the Bad, and the Ugly.
Right. And I'm going with movies that make me happy right now. Movies that I could turn on the TV right now and I would enjoy. Is
this like what's the film school answer? It's supposed to be those movies.
Citizen Kane.
Citizen
my
Kane
favorite movie is Citizen Kane. It was the greatest film ever invented.
I mean, technically it is, but
I mean, it's maybe the most influential film ever made. Greatest? I don't know. I think that
I saw it once and I'm happy with it. Like I don't need to like watch it again or worship it, you know. But I don't know. Yeah, but like that's like the film school answer is like you're supposed to say like those movies. You're supposed to say like the Gone with the Winds and Goodfellas and stuff like that, you know, which are great movies, but like
and we can talk about those in future episodes, but for now, like I think like I have to talk about The Revenant a little bit.
Okay. As
a person who loves cinematography, as a person who wants to be a cinematographer, that movie has cinematography. You know, the world that movie puts you in is like nothing that I've ever watched before. You know, I mean the forest, that northern Canada, like I don't even know how to describe it. It's an experience, and if you since you haven't seen it, you really should watch it. It's worth it. Leo plays a character who rarely talks, spends most of the movie mauled half to death, but oh my God, is that movie a movie? Like it's different, it's unique, it's serious, it's dark, it's beautiful, it's stunning. It's got all of these things going for it, and there's almost no dialogue. Sound design plays a huge part of it, and cinematography plays a huge part of it. And like more so than almost any other movie that I've watched in recent history. Of course, there is always that scene of Leo getting mauled by a bear where it looks kind of risque.
About that.
Yeah.
Well, it's technically based on true events, right?
Kind of.
Loosely, I've heard that too.
I don't know all of the history. I am a big history fan. I don't know all the history about that movie specifically. I do know that it is based on things that actually happened. So I don't know if the story of the Revenant is a true story, but I do know that the setting is a thing that happened. You know, the fur trade in northern Canada way back in the late 1700s. That was a thing. That was absolutely a thing. There's another interesting. It's a show. It's actually, I think it's on Netflix. Frontier. That's in a similar kind of setting, which is pretty interesting. It's kind of like a, you know, historical retelling in this sort of vein of like a Game of Thrones kind of plot line. And another really beautifully shot show. Probably not my favorite show in the world, but definitely interesting to see. But yeah, so Revenant.
All right, yeah, no, I'm definitely gonna check that out. And what was the
Nazca in the Valley of the Wind?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'll send you a link to that one because you probably will have difficulty finding it based on that name. But like that's definitely an interesting thing to watch. It's all hand drawn.
I mean, the Revenant, like, I mean, that one, you know, catches my ear too, but like the Revenant, like, I've been wanting to see that movie for a while. It's just one of those things that kind of slipped under my radar, as that kind of happens sometimes. You're like, oh yeah, I want to see the movie. I just didn't see it when it came out in theaters, and then, you know, sometimes you just don't get around to it. But that's a movie that, like, I will, like, if I have time, like, in the next few weeks, I, like, 100% will watch, because I love Leo. Yeah. And hearing you describe it from like the cinematography standpoint, I trust you, because I know you have great tastes for like cinematography and for stuff like that. So
yeah, I think that's it. I think if I remember correctly, it won the Academy Award for best cinematography. I don't remember. Don't quote me on that. You know, my memory's not great. But
that was him. That was a movie where he finally got his Oscar.
Yeah, he finally got his Oscar in that film. The one that he should have gotten so many times before.
Yeah.
It's
should have gotten with Wolf of Wall Street. He should have gotten right then.
I don't know if I didn't really love Wolf of Wall Street. I wouldn't say it was bad. I don't think it was for me. But that's besides the point. Yeah, that's a great movie. I think you still have 2 slots to fill though. 1 or 2 slots.
Okay. Yeah, so it's in no particular order of the 5. So I guess while it's on my mind, it's been on my mind since you said Clockwork Orange, is 2001: A Space Odyssey.
Yeah, that's valid.
I have to mention that movie, and I know that's one of the film school answers, but
honorable mention.
Yeah, but I love that movie, and I love Kubrick. Like I easily could have said The Shining as well.
Oh, The Shining's a good one. Yeah.
Which is like a great example of like why films should not be accurate to their book. Like when you compare it to like the second time they tried to make The Shining, and they made it, you know, ultra accurate to the book because King was, you know, like lording over them.
You know, side tangent, I will say one of the most it's one of the best classes I took. It was called it was Literature into Film was the title of the course, and it was all about analyzing books and novels as they are translated into movies. And that was an example of why you can't hold this sort of like standard of the movie needs to be just like the book, you know, because that's what a lot of people do. People go out and they watch the movie based on their favorite book, and they're like, why is it so different? Why did they change all of those things? It's so bad. And I think you have to take a step back and think, all right, would it have made sense if they followed it the same way as the book? Would it have been visually as appealing? Would it have been the best movie it possibly could have been? Would it have been under 2.5 hours, or would it have been a 5-hour movie?
Well, think of most Stephen King books, right? Almost all Stephen King books, you spend inordinate amount of times like in the heads of the characters, like just like hearing their inner monologues, or just, you know, King just elaborating and like really filling in the scene. And there's a reason for that, because in that medium you can really do that. You can really like fill in all of the visuals, because he's completely relying, like Stephen King in this case, completely relying on us to imagine, to use like literally like our imagination to picture the environments, to picture the scene. And so that means that's his job to incept that image into us in the way that comes across for him. In a film, you don't need to do that. You can just show me the set. You can just show me Pennywise or Cujo. Like, I don't need it painted for me. Like,
the problem that comes in is when people have this idea in their head of what the world looks like from their interpretation of reading the book, and the director's interpretation is different.
Yeah,
He's brought a different set of
weird
memories
thing about
with him.
a book, and I think you and I have talked about this before, but the thing about books is that you know, the author, especially if they're a really good author, like Stephen King is one of the greatest who's ever been for fiction, is even if the author does a perfect job of like really setting the scene and really like putting you in the moment and really like making you feel like you're there with the characters and everything, you and I or anyone else, we could all read the same book. We all read the exact same words in the exact same order. But we're going to picture them a little differently.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like, especially if there's been a movie already made before we read the book, like if we saw the movie first and then read the book, we're probably going to picture like the environments. We're going to picture like the set pieces from the movie. We're going to picture the actors and actresses. But like, if we read the book first, or there isn't a movie or whatever, they said like, oh, we're in the living room, or the characters in the living room. I'm gonna picture like a living room, like either my living room or like a living room I've seen or been in my life, and like you're probably gonna do the same. And like they're gonna be like, oh, and then they drove down the highway, and I'm gonna picture like a highway in this area or something, like, you know what I mean? Just automatically, I'm not even gonna think about it. I'm gonna picture things that I'm familiar with, and so is the director.
Oh yeah,
you know,
absolutely.
And they're gonna like have a certain idea, and so then once they color it, they bring a definitive nature to it that the book can't have.
Yeah.
You know, in that like, no, like the character looks like this. The character's voice sounds like this.
Yeah.
Yeah, here are the set pieces. Here's where this action takes place.
And I think there are two strategies when turning a book into a film. And I think one of them is trying to match what the author has written word for word as close as you possibly can. And to sort of leave as little up for chance as possible, as little up to the imagination as possible. The other strategy is to completely diverge and kind of like make it your own. And,
like Kubrick did with The Shining.
Right. And I think that in both cases, you get criticism.
Yeah.
You know, one of my favorite movies, and I talk about this all the time, is Rosemary's Baby. Rosemary's Baby was written by Ira Levin. It was a wonderful book. And within a year of it being published, Roman Polanski made it into a movie. And the movie was vastly more successful. The movie was just as good, if not better, than the book. And one of the things that movie did is it followed the book almost chapter for chapter. I mean, it is almost exactly the same. And of all of the books that I've read that have been turned into movies, I think that is the one that is the most faithful to the source material of any that I've ever watched.
Well, I think just to throw out like an example of like movies that I think strike a perfect like happy medium, you know, because like, you know, we have like some movies where like they don't work because they're too accurate, like the remake of The Shining, or some movies that maybe they work really well because they're really accurate, like you know, like Rosemary's Baby. And there's movies that do the opposite of both of those, right? But I think to name like one franchise that is like, I think really done it right, and you're a bigger fan of this franchise than I am, but I think Harry Potter has done it flawlessly.
Yeah,
I think like there's enough there, you know, and I only read the first 4 books, but like
so
there's enough there. Okay, so maybe I'm wrong.
It depends on it. I think personally, I think it really depends on which movies you're looking at. I think 1 through 4, for
Chamber
instance,
of Secrets is like a perfect balance. Like,
I agree.
Perfectly converts that book, and I think that's the best one that I read at least. And I think it's the best movie. But
I prefer the Sorcerer's Stone to Chamber of Secrets.
Sorcerer's Stone is good too, but like it was once like Prisoner of Azkaban hit, I kind of started to like lose the same interest I had. And then by the time Goblet of Fire, it was like, I still like this. I'll still watch the movies, but I'm done reading the books.
And by the time Prisoner of Azkaban came out, I'd already read almost all the books.
Well,
and I was waiting for new books to come out.
They were hurt by losing Chris Columbus's vision, the director of the first 2. You know, because he had just like a really beautiful like visual style.
I agree.
And you know, really like I think knew like how to tell those stories in a visual medium really well. But like okay, Harry Potter is a perfect example of how to like really take characters off of a page and bring them to life. Like, I mean, yes, like they had the benefit of them never being in a visual medium before, so like it's not like you see Daniel Radcliffe, you're like, you know, it's not like seeing like, I don't know, the Jared Leto Joker and being like, he's not as good as Ledger, he's not as good as, you know, Nicholson or whatever. Like, you know, you get to be like, oh, that's who Harry Potter is. It's Daniel Radcliffe. Or
also everybody hold on to your seats. I don't think J.K. Rowling is a great writer. And I think that the Harry Potter series was very, very sort of formatted in a way that was conducive towards transferring to film. I think that like when you really think about it, having reread the books more recently, the characters are not that dynamic. Like Harry, for instance, is a flat, almost emotionless sort of character. I mean, he has emotion, but he's almost completely devoid of like real human empathy. Like he doesn't feel like a person.
Yeah, he's
feels like a
destined to be the
character.
hero who goes on the hero's journey and eventually beats,
Yeah.
he who shall not be named.
And that's the extent of his character. So transferring that into a visual medium, you have all of that injected personality from Daniel Radcliffe, from the actors, from what comes from the sort of traces of how a film is made, where, because there's so much information that's taken from all of the little pieces that make a movie that you don't get from a book. I mean, from a book, you have the words. That's what you have. And you make up the rest. But in a film, you have the added benefit of getting the subtleties of the posture and the acting of all of these different actors that add to this character's personalities. You have the subtleties of how the sets are designed, the colors used, the way the camera is pointed. All of these things add to the story. And I think Harry Potter was a good book series, but positioned really well to be a good movie series also. And I think that's one of the reasons why it's so successful commercially, even beyond just how popular the books were.
Yeah, I think sometimes it helps to do that. Like, if you know that, like, Harry Potter is written for kids. I'm not saying like necessarily kids are super dumb, like, but like kids aren't necessarily going to be as into like a.
They're not going to pick up on the same nuances that somebody who's more.
Why was it hard for a little kid me to read The Fellowship of the Ring? Like I'm not.
In your defense, The Fellowship of the Ring was written like almost a century ago.
Yeah.
So like. I think that beyond being an adult or a kid,
was it 96 that Sorcerer's Stone was written, something like that?
Yeah.
So yeah, that's pretty contemporary. It was
right.
only a few years before it got made into a film. So yeah, no, definitely. It was a different style of writing. It was written for a different, generation and
it was written for
crowd.
a different audience. I mean, it is definitely written for, the person who doesn't sit at home and watch TV. It's written for a time period when
the thinking fantasy man.
Yeah, exactly. Whereas, Harry Potter is a little bit more base, a little bit more sort of fun for the family kind of story.
And that's why it transfers to these blockbuster films really well. Or at least that's a big part of it. But seeing it visually is still awesome. Seeing like the Whomping Willows and petrified cats and flying cars and stuff like that.
And like you said at the beginning,
really
I love
cool.
Harry Potter. I mean, I love the movies, I love the books. Regardless of my feelings about J.K. Rowling as an author, and regardless of my feelings about all of the movies, I think that in general, it's a really, really important contemporary film franchise.
Yeah, I was gonna make another point about it, but I forgot what it is. It doesn't really matter. Okay, I think I have one more.
One more.
Okay,
yeah,
so I guess I might as well just say The Dark Knight.
Yeah.
Like, it's okay. If I had more time to think about this, I probably would have had a little bit more of a robust list. Like, I know I'm saying a lot of like more modern blockbusters.
This is your episode 1.
Oh wait, we never even really talked
so.
about 2001 though.
Oh yeah, I guess.
Okay, we'll get around to The Dark Knight in a minute. But 2001, first of all, yes, Kubrick was fucking incredible.
Absolutely.
Like that dude just
that movie
knew of how to
insane.
tell a story in a visual medium.
Oh my god, that movie is crazy.
But that's one of those movies like, okay, that's a movie that's like almost perfect in like every way. And like
well, I think it's a little slow.
Oh, okay, yeah, it's slow, but like it's still like you can watch the movie and go, yeah, but that's the point.
That's
true. They have
that's
that
true.
like out where he can go, yeah, but like I wasn't making a movie for you to like be like, whoa. He's like, I was making a movie for you to like stop and take in the shots, for you to go like, for you to like, he was lingering on shots long enough for people to think about like what they just saw, like the.
Well, and I think that one of the things that it can be lost on a more contemporary viewer with 2001: A Space Odyssey is there's this thing that's done where those shots that are really long, sometimes they're done like that to make us uncomfortable.
Right.
And I think that with more contemporary viewers, that's something that we've experienced so much because, Kubrick made it such an iconic sort of statement in film that we're more inclined to be like, why is this taking so long? Than, oh my God, this is taking so long. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, like my fiance Christy, I had her watch that movie with me. I mean, she wanted to because she knew I loved it for a long time. And I finally bought it on Blu-ray because I was reviewing it for our school's paper for its 50th anniversary earlier this year. And I had her watch it with me. and you know, getting to see like her first reactions of like there was a lot of scenes where she was like for example when like they find the like the monolith like the on like the one is that on Jupiter or something, or that's on the moon. It's on the moon that they find it. And first of all, how accurate they got the moon the year before we even went there is kind of amazing in and of itself.
That's true.
But like there's that scene, they linger on it for a while, that scene, and there's like the loud like noise in it, like, and it just goes for like way too long, and she like was getting like really uncomfortable, and like, you know, like when he gets to the end of the movie with that really trippy scene where like his face is stretching and contorting and there's all the wacky ass colors and stuff, you know, and then there's like that last scene that's like just not explained where he just like every time he looks at himself or like they cut like to the room again, he's like older until finally he's just like decrepit. And like that movie relishes in its ability to explain fucking nothing to you. And like
yeah,
like,
it doesn't spoon feed you anything.
You're gonna talk about it afterward, and like Kubrick knew that. Like he was like, you know, I'm not gonna explain this movie. People can take from it what they will. And I think I love movies that do that. Yeah. Where they give you just enough for it to be really interesting for you to want to think about it, but like they don't tell you, no, this is it. Like, I mean, Inception's like, yeah, much more basic like, example of that, but it's like Nolan intentionally didn't tell you he's in a dream or he isn't. Like he intentionally left that open enough where it was spinning, but it wobbled. Like you can debate that. Where like with this movie, like Kubrick just shows you, and like even beyond that, there's just like, first of all, it's the cinematography in that movie is breathtaking, especially for its time. And very
those shots in space station
incredibly
in the beginning,
like, in 68, dude, like
incredible,
almost a decade before Star Wars. Almost a decade. Like, I mean, it's incredible. But like, I mean, compare that, like, I love the original Star Trek series, but compare that to the original Star Trek that was out at the same time.
Well,
like,
I mean, granted, Star Trek was a series.
It was a series. Yeah, no, I know. I'm just saying.
But like, yeah, no, totally.
What they could do at the time.
What an accomplished director and crew can do with a good budget, you know, back then is phenomenal
and incredibly unconventional. You know, like there's so much about that film, like the soundtrack. Great example. Like I think I read this or something, or saw it in a behind the scenes or something, where it was like, oh, I think they had like originally they had a different like score done for it, where it was like kind of a more generic sci-fi score where like they kind of made it swell at epic moments, and then, you know, it was just like a movie soundtrack.
Right.
But Kubrick,
good old Kubrick, wasn't happy with that.
When he was cutting the film, he was cutting it to these classical pieces and these Baroque pieces, and you know, these you know, and he ended up just like having that as like the soundtrack to the film while he was making it, and then he ended up realizing that it was perfect.
It was so much better.
Like when you see like the space station spinning to, what is it? Dun, dun, dun. It's that piece. I know, you know what I mean? I forget the name of it, but right. But you wouldn't think that. You would think boom. Like you would think like
classic sci-fi like synthesizer noise.
Right. Yeah. You think the Inception, you know, horn or something. Like, you know what I mean? That's what you would think. But like, no, you get like this like waltz. Like you get this you know, like really like this almost like dancey kind of piece, and it brings this like grandiose nature to it that's really authentic.
It gives such a different feeling to the whole movie. I mean, like, sound is often an underestimated and underappreciated aspect of movies. I think a lot of moviegoers walk out and they take it for granted. They don't.
Sound is the most important thing in film. Prove me wrong.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, like I would make that argument. I think that you can have a movie with awful visuals. It can be in, you know, 420p resolution. It can be terrible, and if it's got good audio, you'll sit and watch the whole thing.
Yeah.
Now, show me a movie, it's beautiful as, you know, Episode 8 of Star Wars, but the sound is clipping and everybody's overmodulated, and it's hard to understand.
You wouldn't watch that movie.
You would turn it off after 5 minutes.
Yeah, after 5 seconds, you'd hear the first character start talking, and you'd be like, oh crap, or like, I don't know, just like certain things like people don't appreciate Foley.
Oh yeah.
Like, you know, like, I mean, anybody who's into film, which if anybody's listening to this, you probably are, but a lot of people don't appreciate that every sound you hear that isn't dialogue, and even some dialogue has to be like 80 yard in, but like every sound you hear has been Foleyed in.
Yeah, more or less. Yeah,
pretty much. Yeah, every step of the shoe, every time someone turns on a sink or opens up a package or opens a door or something like.
Yeah, not including like score or soundtrack, but
yes, but like every sound you hear like in the action of the scene.
Sony made that sound
yes,
for that movie
in a studio. Somebody went like, I bet that would sound like me breaking a piece of broccoli, like
Yeah, no, absolutely.
And it's just kind of amazing, like how much of that goes into it. But yes, the soundtrack is another unbelievably important element. Like horror, horror lives in the soundtrack.
Oh yeah,
like that's what builds suspense. And like if you watched a horror movie, like if you have a horror movie that scares the shit out of you and you can't watch it because it's so terrifying to you, watch it with like Ariana Grande on or something.
God, just instantaneously you're no longer
whatever. Well, yeah, you're not going to be scared. Like watch it.
So let's look at Psycho. I think Psycho is probably the most iconic film school answer for this sort of debacle. I mean, that shower scene.
Yeah,
I mean,
those
like,
spikes.
It's iconic, and it's so unsettling.
Jaws. Just half steps. Dun dun. Yeah. And like those are super like obvious answers, but like even just like there's certain like just swells and like little things that sound does, and like the building of like a rhythm. Sometimes like in a scene where like somebody's wearing Halloween, right? That soundtrack, not only is that main theme iconic, but like I rewatched the first Halloween like 6-7 months ago, and that's another movie where like the sound in certain moments, like especially like those moments where you're like POV and Michael's point of view and stuff, like it's just like I can't really think how to describe it, but it's done so well that like it really brings you in. And if you watch that movie on mute, it wouldn't have the same effect.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's it's not a horror movie, but going back to 2001, that's another great thing. And there's also a lot of just like little like subtle stuff, like one really famous shot is when one of the primates throws a bone, which is like the great representer of mankind developing technology and weapons and everything, throws the bone in the sky, and then when the bone falls, it cuts to like a spacecraft.
Yeah.
And it's like, this is like how far mankind has come in its technology. It's like, but at the end of the day, we're still...
The violent ape with the bone to the violent ape on the space station.
Yeah, exactly. And it's little stuff like that, or like the way that it like the juxtaposition of Hal and artificial being with the humans. Hal ends up, at the end of the day, Hal is the one who has the emotions. Hal is the one who's like, I'm afraid, Dave. Like, I don't want to die or whatever. And Dave's the one who's like, I have to kill you. You must end. Like, he, like, the humans are like the cold robotic ones. And like, and also there's a lot of stuff in there that's like fairly accurate. Like, I mean, like like not only the moon, like, and everything, how things look on the moon, like they look just like the pictures we ended up taking, although he might have faked the moon landing. So who knows? That's one of the big conspiracy theories.
Yeah, I don't think that
whatever.
happened.
Yeah, I don't think so either, but whatever. Anyway, like webcamming. Like there's scenes in that where like the one character is like webcamming his daughter.
Yeah.
And like there's a camera up there and he's looking at it, and at the she's on the screen and everything. Yeah. And like this is literally exactly how we do it today.
You know what I love about that scene? I think that really is a scene that only somebody in production could have come up with. Because like think about the time that there was no internet, and some guy who was working in the TV studio probably saw like a field monitor with a live feed and was like, you know what? I bet in the future you'll be able to do that over massive distances of space with no wires. And that was it. That was like the whole idea. And I love how right he was, or she or whoever it was.
Whoever,
but like that is such a beautiful concept to me.
Yeah, like and they just nail it, and like they get it so right, and like, or they just like the creative little things with how they did things practically. Like one famous example, although it's not actually perfect if you pay close attention, is the floating pencil. Or is it a pen? I don't remember. It's either a pen or pencil, but it's like floating while like they're on like what looks like, and they made it look like an airplane, which isn't totally accurate, whatever. But like, or maybe he is on an airplane. I don't remember. Either way, like there's like a pen or pencil floating, and like the stewardess like comes and like pulls it out of thin air as it's floating, and what it actually was a like a pen/pencil taped to this big glass piece, and they were kind of moving it around,
right.
so that when the camera got it, it looked like it was free floating. But actually, if you look closely enough, you can see her like pull it off, and you can see for a split second it like sticks as she pulls it off, so you can see it like the adhesive pulling off. Whatever, but like in the 60s, like this is just super inventive. Like today that would be a CG
and we're both
utensil.
science fiction guys, so we can both appreciate how like what science fiction has done for special effects. Because let's be honest, I mean, you can make a drama on a budget that doesn't accommodate for special effects, but you can't make a science fiction movie without a special effects budget. And
no, you can't.
Special effects, prop
even
people,
just in
and
costuming,
set design people. Oh my god,
that.
even in just in costuming.
Yeah.
And the people, this is a shout out to all you production people in set design and props and art departments out there.
Props to the props.
Props to the props. You guys make science fiction. I mean, without like the geniuses at like What a Workshop or like, what is it? The Jackson or not Peter Jackson.
ILM.
ILM. Yeah. ILM. Like these companies changed the way that we made movies.
Yeah. I mean, I think to me, like sci-fi is like birthed in the writing.
Well, I mean, it's
brought to life through like the art department.
Absolutely.
You know,
absolutely.
And through just the visuals. Like that's, you know, and like, and of course, obviously like the performances.
Yeah. Well, let's think about like one of my favorite movies of all time, Blade Runner. And we'll make this quick because I think we should probably wrap it up soon.
Right.
But Blade Runner, you know, based on an amazing book, Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep?
Right.
Amazingly well written.
Philip K. Dick is an incredible writer. Like
that's absolutely true. But that movie wouldn't be what it was if it weren't for the beautiful, beautiful set designs.
And Ridley Scott having just an unparalleled eye at that time for... You know, like that. What's the word? Techno. Or
dystopian sort of neo noir.
Neo noir. That's the word. That's the word I'm looking for. Yeah. Just like, and he like kind of like invented it, like, and visually.
Visually,
like, yeah. You know,
I mean,
like
he took all the inspiration from the book, but you know, that was really the first time it appeared on screen.
Yeah.
You know, that was the first time people were going out.
But what do you think of when you think of like futuristic stuff? You still think of flying cars and neon.
Yeah. Dark, wet streets and neon.
Yep. You think of certain noir elements, like the wet streets and like silhouettes and you know, long deep shadows and but you think of like big, you know, flashy neon city lights and LED screens and
filth.
And yeah, exactly. Like people like dirty ass like clothes and coats and stuff like that, but also like holograms and flying cars and stuff like that. Like you picture that like cityscape of several layers of flying cars in perfect lanes, you know, overlapped on top of each other, you know, like that's what you see. Like I think most people these days, if you said like, picture a science fiction world, they'd probably picture something. They might picture something more contemporary with like robots, but like if you said like a real science fiction world, they would picture basically Blade Runner.
I mean, that's what I would picture.
Yeah.
So fun cameo to end it off on, or fun fact to end it off on. The Millennium Falcon has a cameo in Blade Runner. It's as one of the buildings in the background of the city.
Really? I never noticed that.
Yep. It's hard to see, but it's there. Yeah, they used it on the set.
Did you catch that yourself, or did you hear about that?
No, I read about that. I read about that. And I watched, most recent time I watched Blade Runner. I watched the X-ray version on Amazon Prime.
Nice.
And that was one of the little tidbits, and it actually takes you right to the scene where it's there. It's very difficult to see, but it is there.
Nice.
All right. So, we'll
talk about The Dark Knight next time.
Yeah, we'll talk about a lot next time. There's plenty of movies to come. We'll talk more about movies we've both seen. Hopefully, we could talk about some of the movies we watched together, like
or movies that we've seen like recently. Like what's 5 movies you've seen in the last year that like you really loved or really impacted you in some way or something like that. That kind of narrows it down.
Oh my goodness! Oh my goodness!
Still
I don't know
films.
if I can do that. We'll see. All right. Thank you very much.
All right. Thanks for listening, guys. Till next time.